Mayor Kane, you're now live on YouTube.
Thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order at exactly 1 o'clock. Are you going to put up an agenda for us, Emily? Trying to find it on my laptop here, but I can't find it. Thank you. If you just enlarge it for me a little bit, we could maybe get moving ahead. Thank you.
Great.
So we've already called our meeting to order. This is a special meeting of council. Consider fishing in the parks, groups in the parks, use of the parks, municipal boat launches, and so on. We have a full council on my screen. So we're moving forward. Are there any additions to the agenda that I haven't already mentioned? See none. Need a motion then, please, to confirm the agenda.
Scott will move.
Thank you. And Larry seconded it. All in favor? And that's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? And I see none. So we can move on. Public question period on agenda items only. Emily, have you had any questions submitted?
We've had no questions submitted.
Okay, I spoke with Pat earlier. Pat, this would probably be a good time, since it's public question period, to mention that we have had several correspondences from ratepayers regarding our boat launches. I believe I've received 4 telephone calls, 4 emails, all in favor of getting the boat launches opened again. 2 emails in favor of opening the boat launch in Bewdley, but limiting the boat launch in Gore's Landing. So that would, I think, cover any correspondence that I've had. Anyone else from council want to weigh in on anything that they've received? Okay, so we'll move forward then. So we have no presentations, no scheduled public hearings or meetings either. So we're simply at, this is arising from previous minutes. I don't think we've had those up for this meeting, do we, Emily?
We do not know.
No. So we'll try to get right into 9.1 then. With the reason we're being here is our waterfront parks. So it is recommended the Council Corporation Township of Hamilton acts as follows. The council receives a report from Waterfront Park. So I guess we'll stop right there and let Trevor step in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thanks for calling the special council meeting so that we can proceed with some recommendations. And as a result of the provincial regulations that are taking place effective 12:01 Friday morning, being midnight tonight, and our recent recommendations that come back to council, and we basically recommended the color framework and to reopen our parks being consistent with the colors that were provided. And the main concerns with the basis we use on reopening with that color framework, and that color framework was put in place to reduce the moving of people from between regions. So we felt once the entire province was in that green or yellow phase, that would permit people to move safely into our region. And right after, obviously, we made that decision, the province then changed their regional approach to a more province-wide approach, and the color framework changed to a roadmap to reopen with a step 1, which, as I mentioned, takes effect tonight at midnight, and then step 2 and step 3. Step 1 of the reopen plan is really encouraging the outdoor recreation and allowing people to get outside and continue with outdoor recreation. And my feelings are, obviously, the boat launches and fishing in parks is consistent with the recommendation that they are allowing people to permit with. So that was the recommendation, to open the fishing and the boat launch in Bewdley as of step 1. And then the Gore's Landing boat launch has, I think even pre-COVID, has had some issues with traffic. It's in a highly densely populated area with limited parking. So recommendation there is to wait until step 3 when things open up a little more, and kind of review and see how that looks through these next month and a half, I guess, before we get to that step 3. Roughly, that's just a guess at this point. I don't know. And evaluate that and look at step 3 of reopening that.
Okay, thank you. I'll go first to members of council for any questions or input. Yes, Pat? Just unmute, Pat.
Okay, when I've been reading the different things about the steps, like Trevor said, it sounds like it's no longer during regional, it's looking at the provinces as a whole. But what I've been trying to see and haven't noticed, and just wondering if anybody else has, is that other than the comment that you could go to a second residence within the province, have they said anything now in terms of travel within the province, that they're like discouraging it or encouraging it? Has anybody seen anything on that?
I have not. I believe the stay-at-home order though has been lifted, right?
Yes. The reason I was asking is because if they're talking about outside activities being okay, and there no longer being a provincial concern about us, about people like the tourism side of it and people coming into the community, and if we are not as council trying to limit the number of tourists coming in, then to my mind, opening the boat launch 7 days a week in Bewdley makes perfect sense. And I don't understand with Gore's Landing, why, if the issue isn't so much about COVID, but is about traffic and parking, why we're considering opening it in step 3. It would seem to me that we keep it closed to motorized boats and leave it open to kayaking and canoeing, which sits more with the size of the village. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yes, Mark.
I can remember we tried to close the one in Gore's Landing a number of years ago. And I remember it's been brought up at least twice. And when we researched out there, there was a number of people that wanted it to remain open. And those were even local people, not just people from outside the area, but people from within the village itself. So if we're looking at closing Gore's Landing, which, quite frankly, I'm not bothered either way. I mean, I think maybe we should at least have some sort of a public meeting there, or at least part of a council meeting that we could open up if there is concerns there. And if it turns out that those concerns are no longer, then by all means, I would agree with what Pat's saying and going with a kind of, maybe, canoes or kayaks or whatever else we want to put through there rather than motorized vehicles. I think we should at least have the, give the public an opportunity to comment before we just simply close it.
Maybe we could use our kind of Hamilton website again that we're using for ORVs. Open it up for a period of time with that specific question. As you say, Mark, prior to a council meeting, could be put on the agenda then.
Yeah, because I don't foresee it being a lot of people commenting. I mean, you might have 10, you may have 5, you may have 10, you may have 2, you may not have any this time. But last time we did try and close it, there was a number that from the village itself that wanted it to remain open for motorized vehicles or motorized boat vehicles. So
Yes, Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In lieu of that, I think we've got to make a decision so that people get an understanding of what we're doing. From what I can see, is Gore's Landing is just inappropriate for motorized boat launching for two reasons. It's very congested. It's a small area to try to do that. There's safety concerns, there's environmental concerns. And I think if we close it permanently, but allow it for only kayaks and canoes, it makes it a lot safer for everybody and a lot easier for us to control parking with trailers. I was down there watching people trying to back trailers down with motorized boats, and it was a chaos. We've got people running around in a very small area, and I think we've got to make a decision either to close it or, as Trevor said, wait till 3. But I think we should be closing indefinitely for motorized boats. That's my opinion.
So if I just get some clarification from Trevor, there's a difference between the two villages. The boat launch in Bewdley is in fact a boat launch. It was designed to be a boat launch. It's public. Whereas we'll call it the place where they're launching boats in Gore's Landing is simply a convenient place where the road runs right down to the lake. And it's not really a public boat launch. Or could you give me clarification there, Trevor, please?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor. I think, and it was before my time, but the infrastructure was put in place in Bewdley for boat launches. The boat launch is maintained. There's docks that the township maintain and look after, and there's a designated parking area for boats and trailers to address them concerns. Gore's Landing is similar to all other, I'll say other municipalities on Rice Lake, and what it is the end of a road. I would call it a road that ends at the lake that people use to launch their boats. We don't do any maintenance on that area, but as long as people can use it, they do. The difference between that area and some of the other ones in our neighboring municipalities is that the Gore's Landing one is in a densely populated area. There's a lot of houses around there, and it makes a challenge for parking of boat trailers. And once council makes a decision on the fishing, that if we allow fishing in there, and then we add the boat trailers to it, then you have kind of that, there's going to be a huge influx of users there. Given that historically many people have used the Gore's Landing one as a boat launch and continue to do so.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I've been to some of the ones in Alma Cole. I hate to say it, a neighboring municipality, but I can honestly say the ones in Alma call them, and I wouldn't even call them boat launches, and they're listed as boat launches. I mean, and you cannot, people launch boats there, but they're not anywhere near as nice as the one in Gore's Landing as far as that goes. I mean, they are, if you talk about a boat launch that should be used for canoes and kayaks, that's any in Alma Colvin, that's about all they have as far as use for theirs. But you can use them. They're tough. But that one in Gore's Landing, I've used it. I've backed up, and it's nice to launch a boat in, but it's after you launch the boat that the issues arise, and where you park people and you know, where the trailers go afterwards. And I've only ever launched there once, but when I did launch there, it was wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful spot to back into. The water's, you can back out into the water nicely. But as I say, after that, it becomes an issue.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I have Larry and then Scott.
Mr. Mayor, just a question to Councillor Lubshin. Those boat launches that you were describing in Alnwick Haldeman, what was the density of the population there? Houses? Was there houses?
Yeah, there's houses and cottages and so forth. Some of them are even hard to find. They're in amongst, they're so close to some of the, like I've been to 3 of them. There's at least 3, maybe 4. My son and I went out, we actually investigated them all because we wanted to fish the other end of the lake. And when we went down there, I mean, we went to one night, and I mean, we literally had to unhook the trailer, back, push the boat into the water, then hook the trailer back up so that we could get out. I mean, it was that tight and that close. Another one was, there's one that's in an area where there's very little there's maybe one cottage there, but then there's another one where there's a number of cottages there. I don't think there's any households there, just cottage, mainly cottages where theirs are, but you had to literally drive about, I'd say a good 300 or 400 feet away from the boat launch to park your boat afterwards. And there was limited parking for that one. But they're not maintained at all. I can tell you that. There's no maintenance to them whatsoever.
Can I have a
Caleb?
follow-up on that?
Yes, sure.
As in Gore's Landing, we've got a lot of people walking around on the dock there. So the description that you were having there, was there a lot of people standing around, milling around like they do in Gore's Landing?
Yeah, there's one in El McCollum, and it's right amongst a bunch of cottages. And literally there's one cottage that one property owner, he owns the one, you can't even get out of the boat on the one side because he owns the property and the docks there. There's no dock, I can tell you, there's no docks whatsoever in El McCollum in any of their launches. You literally launch your boat and that you're on your own. There's no docks. Like, we have it pretty nice for people compared to El McCollum and what they do.
I
Okay,
think
Scott, sorry.
if I could just have a
One
rebuttal
more
on
forward.
that. Just, my concern is that there are other options for people to launch boats in Gore's Landing. It's not that if we closed it, it wouldn't mean that there's no boat launching at all in Gore's Landing. People may have to buy a pass to get their boat launched, $5 or $10. I mean, I think we should be actually charging $10 to launch a boat too, to try to recover some costs. But I still think that we should be considering closing Gore's Landing indefinitely. That's my opinion, and I yield back to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Scott, you're up.
Thanks, Bill. I guess my questions are to you, Trevor. Excuse me. And for the moment, they're setting Gore's Landing aside. I'm not speaking of that. If we move forward and open boat launches and fishing in Harwood and Buedling, I assume there will be some restrictions that come with that, some regulations. Am I correct?
Regulations, well, the only regulations that'll come in effect are the provincial regulation 82-20, which is the step one of the reopen plan. So it limits gatherings of 10 and things like that. And then outside of that, just our parks bylaw that would be affected. We do have enforcement in place. Enforcement will continue through the summer to enforce them parks bylaws. They have not, they've been advising people that are not following the provincial regulation. However, they haven't ticketed anybody at this point in regards to that, just the parks bylaw.
You have already answered my second question of enforcement. And what I clearly heard you say is that we have enforcement authority in place that can deal with those requirements.
Correct.
Can I come back now to Gore's Landing with a follow-up question? I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding the difference between launching a motorized boat there and using it for kayaks and canoes. Could someone, Trevor, possibly yourself, describe to me why that reduces our concerns there or traffic issues there?
I would say that the main thing would be the trailers. Motorized boats are coming in on trailers. They're trying to turn around. That's what's eating up a lot of the parking spots. Most kayaks and canoes are coming in on the roofs of cars or the back of a truck.
So it's the trailer itself then, okay? And taking up
Correct.
twice the parking space, obviously.
Or better than twice, yeah.
And plus, maybe we could factor in it's easier for the majority to get to the water's edge when there's no trailer on behind, they have to back up.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Arthur?
If I may just clarify one comment that pertains to the reopening, the roadmap to reopen. And one of the guidance the province provides for marinas and boating clubs is that they say recreational boating is permitted, but only members of a household can gather on a boat. So this may be for the larger types of boats, you know, the large summer canoes, the styles that they have. However, I just raised the flag that in reference to Deputy Mayor Gibbs' comment about, are there any other regulations or any other issues that may pertain? So this comes from the roadmap to open guidance for marinas. But I don't see it as being one that we would be enforcing. Smaller boats would only logically be, that launch in our area would only logically be able to hold a household or a small portion of a household, 1 or 2 members.
Pat?
This wasn't why I originally raised my hand, but the one exception to what you were saying, Arthur, that we do get out on the lake is the pontoon party boats. And I don't know if they launch from Butler or not. But my actual question was to Trevor again. If we were to temporarily close Scores Landing to motorized boats, what would you put in place? Like, what would that look like for it to be closed? Would it be chained? Would it?
Sorry, temporarily or permanently?
Temporary. Like what?
So temporarily, we right now we have a chain installed that we put up on Friday evening and we take down on Monday morning. If it council's wish to close it more permanently, we would move away from that chain and probably go with a concrete barrier or something a little more permanent that people could still get around and access the water with a small canoe or kayak or whatever it may be.
So I guess what I'm wondering, could we consider then, instead of talking about having it closed to step 3, to small, to motorized boats, could we consider doing the chain thing with the sign saying that as a pilot project, we're closing it for this year? If you have a comment, make it to Bang the Table or wherever, so that not just the people on the website see it, but people who go to use it actually know, okay, this is how to comment, and we're looking at what happens over this season. Is that a possibility? Because I understand what Mark was saying about if the community has an issue with it, then we want to give them a chance to respond. And if I don't understand relating it to stage 3. If we're doing it as a temporary measure, I think we do it as an interim measure while we're trying to decide whether or not we want motorized boats going there. I have launched from Gorse Landing 2 or 3 times. Never had trouble with the launch itself. Always had trouble with what to do with the truck and the trailer. So I don't think that it's the best place to go in terms of trying to launch for the motorized ones. But I don't want to see it closed down completely. I think that the smaller craft are good.
Yes, Arthur.
Sure, Mayor Kane. Trevor and I and some of the other senior staff have had discussions about what closing the Gorse Landing launch might look like. And we would, obviously, if there's direction for us to do that, we would like to be able to consider some proposals, alternatives that might work. So the reason I say that is, for example, there is the dry hydrant that is located in Gorse Landing. There are people who would want to use whether it's for canoe or water access or walking access. So we'll just want to make sure that something that's designed is safe and still allows some kind of pedestrian access or minor access. And that's something that we would work together and design and then come back with clarification of our plans with council.
Yes, Larry.
We can't let this drag on much longer. I mean, here we are, we're starting the summer and we're still talking about what are we going to do? We've got to make a decision and stick with it so that there's no more confusion. I mean, we do this or we do that. We can't come back all the time asking ourselves to make a decision and then come back a month later to make a decision. So
I would suggest, Larry, that if we look at we had Emily show us the prepared motion. Could we look at it and just see if we want to tweak it in any way? And like you say, make a decision. Although COVID is making things different. I mean, as we get more vaccinations and our numbers of COVID continue to fall and the provincial government allows more freedoms and so on, those things dictate changes. So we may be stuck with a change or two yet before we get to something permanent. But I'm going to suggest that we look at the motion that has been prepared, and we'll see if we can tweak it in any way. I'm aware of Mark's point that's before we make a permanent decision, I think it's always valuable to have public input. And we have the means of doing that now with the Bang the Table or the Hamilton Connect program. It gives us the opportunity to reach out. So the motion that's been prepared, that we receive the report and the council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Beardley, including weekends, when the province's roadmap to reopens is in step 1, which is tomorrow. And so can I ask any problems with that part of the motion? We're all in agreement. Secondly, that council authorizes staff to reopen the waterfront parks and permit fishing in the parks when the province's roadmap is step 1. Any problems with that? No. And council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Gore's Landing, including weekends, when the province's roadmap to reopen is in step 3. So that seems to be one where we have some contention. I would see it open now to canoes and non-motorized vehicles. Excuse me. Yeah, non-motorized vehicles. I guess a boat's a vehicle. Yes, Pat? You just have to go off mute, Pat.
Okay, I have a problem with the third one in the actual wording, separate from what you're talking about, Bill, because I do agree about the non-motorized. I don't think we should be making a motion that uses the terms reopens in step 3 in case the government changes how they want to do things again. Step 1's not an issue because it's happening tomorrow. So it's real, we'll be open. But if they rename their program or they redo how they're going to do it, we're setting ourselves up. And really what we've said consistently in here is COVID or not, we really should be looking at whether we want to do something with Gore's Landing. So I don't want it to stay in step 3. I don't care how you do the wording for the other part. If you want to put temporarily while further consideration is given to motorized boats, but I don't want the reopen in step 3 part.
I think this is where we can work in Mark's idea. Instead of using step 3, we can say until after we've had some public consultation.
Okay, we're going to put a date limit up.
Emily, you have some input?
Sorry, Mayor Kane, through you. If we could just get a mover and seconder before we start debating the motion as a whole.
Yes, Scott moved, Pat seconded.
Could we maybe make a date then perhaps for the next council meeting or by the next, not the June meeting, but the July meeting? And perhaps add that to some signage out there that we're looking at closing this.
So,
vote
so if
launch.
I can so that's good, Mark. So if I can review what you're saying then, so we're going to authorize the opening of Gore's Landing to non-motorized
Yes,
boats. And we're going to consider that as a temporary until, I guess it would be the July 15th meeting of council. But we will make it, as Larry says, we have to make a decision to make it
sure.
permanent. And in the meantime, then we will get our Connect Hamilton website in motion so that we can collect some public input.
Can Trevor add some signage down there so some of the people there are aware of what we're doing or thinking on doing in Gore's Landing itself?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, we can do whatever signage is appropriate. But I'm just kind of looking for clarification, the status of the boat launch right now is that it is open during the week and closed on weekends. So is that going to remain and just open on weekends for non-motorized, or is, I'm just kind of looking for clarification on that.
Scott?
In my thoughts, we would be having it open both weekends and during the week and at weekends for the canoes and kayaks only, and that motorized would be closed both week and weekends. And I'm gonna go further in that I don't think there's sufficient time to get adequate thoughts together between now and the July meeting. I think it should be beyond that. And there's probably not going to be a council meeting in August, so we might be looking at September if that isn't too far out.
I think it's too far.
I think you'll hear from people if there's an issue very quickly. Because I mean, if they can't get their boat out there and they're relying on that as a place to launch their boat from that village, you'll hear between now and July. I'm pretty certain of that. You'll hear within the week, I would think.
That's 5 weeks.
That's exactly right. You'll hear from.
So Larry's up.
I agree with what Deputy Mayor Jibb is saying. And that way we make a decision. Staff knows what they're doing. The people understand. And Mark, further to what you just said, you went all the way to Alnick-Haldeman to launch your boat. There's no reason people can't launch their boat in Bewdley or at one of the local private boat launches. And I think we've got to make a decision and make it stand.
So just
Because
to
it goes, this goes beyond COVID. It goes to safety, environment, and making it a green space. That will certainly help us. And I think we've got to stick with it. And I support Deputy Mayor Jibb's. I think it would be a motion if he's putting it forward. And I would support that.
So are you including that we don't do anything until September?
I believe that's what Councillor Jibb was saying.
Yes, so you're going with that part of it as well.
Yeah.
If I might interject, Bill, my thought there is that we're going to get hopefully past the emotional early stage frustration of people, give them an opportunity to truly adjust and realize that there is other opportunities, both in the village of Gore's Landing and not too far away from there. If we give them 5 weeks, they're just going to be upset and ticked off and say, well, we got to wait 5 weeks and then we're back good again. I want them to actually look at other alternatives seriously. And that would be one of the thoughts why I would want it longer.
So Pat,
That was why I originally suggested that we do this season as a pilot project with it closed. But I think that it should be closed for the season, period, like not September, because I know they still put fishing boats out in the end of September for Thanksgiving. I think we should say very clearly it's for this season as a pilot. And then note that there is a public boat launch in Bewdley, so that somebody who's come to the area not knowing about Bewdley knows that there is another one locally. And then we either put it on, bang the table for the comments now, or we put it on in the spring and make the decision next year for next year.
I believe I made that motion and Pat seconded it on Emily's prodding a bit. I would be more than happy to modify that motion and include this season in those thoughts. If Pat would be willing to second, I don't know.
that's an amendment you're suggesting.
Yes.
Yes, Pat.
I am willing to second the amendment, yes. It is friendly.
Anything further from members of council?
Just so that I'm clear, then, are we opening it for kayaks and canoes, or are we
Yes.
closing it entirely?
Open.
So before we voted, I was gonna have that section, just see what Emily has sketched out for us. I know you're madly writing and we're trying to get the wordage and the verbiage. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if we're going to vote, we need the wordage for sure.
If I can, Mayor Kane.
Yes, sorry.
Related to that is if we're saying just canoes and kayaks, we might be missing others such as people that have paddle boards or
Yes.
sailboats or those kinds of vessels as well. But certainly I think the intent is to stop motorboats or motorized equipment from launching from there with the larger trailers.
Should it also be a separate motion since the first one's tied to COVID and the second one isn't?
I don't
Like
think so.
first-
You said it's happening tomorrow.
Okay,
Yes, Larry. You just have to unmute Larry.
I would also say that the sailboats would be a caution because they do come on a trailer. So I would not place sailboat, but sailboards are okay.
Mhm.
They come on top. Anything with a trailer is really what we're talking about.
Correct. Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So have you had a chance, Emily?
Okay, so I'll just start at the very beginning of it. So we have council receives report 2107 waterfront parks. And then next we're into council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Bewdley, including weekends when the province's roadmap to reopen is in step 1. And council authorizes staff to reopen the waterfront parks to permit fishing in the parks when the province's roadmap to reopen is in step 1. And council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Gore's Landing to non-motorized boats, including weekends, for the remainder of the 2021 season.
Mark?
Bill, if I could, can we break that down into 2 motions? Because I'm having a really tough time with the second part of the motion. I don't agree with the Gore's Landing part of it, but I strongly agree with the Bewdley and the fishing part of it. So is that possible to break that down into 2 motions? So that we're dealing with just the Bewdley and the fishing, and then we're dealing with the Gore's Landing one separately?
So I'm gonna go to somebody else who has a better idea about point of order than I do. Mark? That'll be our clerk or our CAO. How's that for passing the buck?
can Scott and I just amend our motion? Should we take off part 2 or part 3?
I'm certainly willing to do that to help Mark's position on this.
Through your Mayor Kane, I think that would be the approach, is to have the motion amended to drop the last one and then to have a follow-up
Second motion.
motion introduced to deal with the third part, the extra part or the last part. So then it's amending the first motion to delete the part and then to have that then set up as a declared sort of second motion.
I think we're somewhere in the area, Scott, of amending your amendment.
I think we should just get Emily to do this and we can put our names to it afterwards. Emily, I believe you would have the intent, and I'm certainly willing to keep my name to the first 2 components of this motion.
I as well.
All right. So if we have our minds set at least on the first 2 sections and Emily's read them, I could call the question all in favor of the latest motion put forward by Scott and Pat. And that's carried unanimously. So we now have a separate motion. Pat?
I will make the motion. But if Emily can just read the wording that she originally had for part 3, she worded exactly what I was trying to say. So Emily, you still kept that somewhere?
Oh, I kept it. Yep.
Hey, make my motion and I will say that's me.
Through you, Mayor Kane, it is recommended the Council of Corporation of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows: that council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Gore's Landing to non-motorized boats, including weekends, for the remainder of, council authorizes staff to close the public boat launch in Gore's Landing to it was right the first time.
Yeah, you were.
Council authorizes staff to reopen the public boat launch in Gore's Landings to non-motorized boats, including weekends, for the remainder of the 2021 season.
A motion.
And it's seconded. And does that imply then obviously that no motorized boats during the entire week? We're not allowing them in Monday to Friday either, simply non-motorized. Okay, I got the head shakes. I just want to make sure what we're voting on here. So discussion then on the motion. Do you have something, Larry?
I think we should just clarify that it's for canoes and kayaks and sailboards,
Paddleboards, yes. And
paddleboards, whatever they call it. Because if we don't, non-motorized is definitive, but it's not clarifying what you can use it for.
I would prefer to say vehicles that don't require, or craft that do not require a trailer. Because as soon as you start saying this, and then somebody brings something different, there's gonna be well, does that one count or not count? And really, it's about the trailer, it's not about the craft.
And in all fairness, Pat, I have seen people pull in with 4 canoes on a trailer.
Ugh.
No, really, so.
You know, when you said that, I'm like, yeah, you're right.
No, you're making
okay.
good, no, but you're making a good point. It's not the canoes, that we're trying to stop. It's the trailers we're trying to stop. So, I mean, maybe it should simply say vehicles or watercraft that are not, presented on trailers.
Yeah, they'll have to figure out how to do it, but at least they can get them in the water somewhere.
Car tops in the backs of trucks. Trevor, did you have some input?
I was through Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say that the way that we block off the launch area will be done accordingly to only permitting small crafts in. It'll be blocked off in a way that we won't allow or won't permit trailers to back into the water. So I'm not saying that these small little, like you said, the one-offs with a trailer load of canoes isn't going to slip through the cracks, but for the most part, the large trailers that need to back boats into the water will be blocked off accordingly.
So if we go with just craft that do not require trailers, that will cover it, and occasionally somebody might sneak through. Is kind of where you're at, Trevor?
I'm kind of where you were originally. Kayaks and canoes will, non-motorized, is something that somebody can carry. They're gonna have to carry it into the water wherever they're carrying. So.
Okay.
Well, let's use the phrase non-motorized watercraft. That allows sailboards and paddleboards, canoes, kayaks.
It's something that new that might be invented this summer.
There is inflatable boats out there that people will pop into their trunk and throw a motor on. So, like I said, we'll see everything, and we will, like I said, we'll block it off in according to the best of our ability to reduce the large amount of large trailers in the area.
Any other input? So we're all clear on what the motion states now then? We need to reread it? No. So I'll call the question then. All in favor? I see 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. Opposed? 2. The clerk doesn't get a vote, by the way. So it's
I
just
know.
one.
I'm not sneaking it in there. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I just get the seconder for that last motion?
Pat and Scott. I think it was reversed, wasn't it?
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I thought that would take at most a half an hour, and here we are. We only have 15 minutes before our next meeting, so unless there's something, ask for a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Pat. Seconded by Mark. All in favor? See everybody in 15 minutes. Get a washroom break and a drink of water. I think it could be a while. Yes, something.
So, sorry, Mr. Mayor, we do need a vote on the confirmatory bylaw.
That's always Scott, Emily.
Okay.
Motion, Bruce Scott, seconded by Larry. All in favor of confirmatory bylaw? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see everybody soon.